The telegram crumpled in Willa Ashford's trembling hands as she stood on the train platform in Gold Hill, Colorado, watching the afternoon sun paint the mountains in shades of copper and gold, knowing that any moment the man she was supposed to marry would arrive to claim a bride who had lied about everything. She had written to Zachary Nash under a false pretense, describing herself as a proper widow seeking companionship and a fresh start, when in truth she was running from a violent engagement to a Boston banker's son who believed his money entitled him to treat her like property. The bruises had faded during the long journey west, but the memory of Robert Cavendish's rage when she had dared to refuse his advances still made her flinch. Her parents, blinded by his wealth and social standing, had called her ungrateful when she tried to tell them what he truly was. So she had stolen enough money for a train ticket and answered an advertisement she found in a discarded newspaper, spinning a tale about a deceased husband and a respectable past. Now, standing in the dusty street of this mining town with the Rocky Mountains towering above her, Willa felt the weight of her deception like a stone in her chest. The other passengers had already collected their belongings and dispersed into the town, leaving her alone with a single worn carpetbag and a conscience that wouldn't stop whispering that she was no better than a common thief. Miss Ashford. The voice was deep and warm, with a hint of uncertainty that made Willa turn slowly to face the man approaching from across the rutted road. Zachary Nash was taller than she expected, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard work and sun-darkened skin that proved he spent his days outdoors. His hair was dark beneath his hat, and his eyes were a startling shade of green that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed lies. He wore simple working clothes, clean but mended in places, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. Mr. Nash. Willa's voice came out steadier than she felt. She forced herself to meet his gaze, though guilt threatened to choke her. "I'm glad you made it safely." Zachary removed his hat, revealing a face that was more handsome than his letters had suggested, with strong features and a genuine smile that made her stomach twist with shame. "The journey from the east must have been long. I hope it wasn't too difficult." "It was manageable, thank you." Willa clutched her bag tighter, hyper-aware of every word she spoke, every potential slip that might reveal her true circumstances. "The scenery changed so dramatically as we traveled. I've never seen mountains quite like these. They're something, aren't they?" Zachary's smile broadened as he glanced at the peaks surrounding the town. "I came here 5 years ago and never wanted to leave. There's a freedom in this country that gets into your blood." He turned back to her, his expression softening. "I hope you'll come to feel the same way. I know this is all sudden and strange, meeting like this after only letters between us, but I want you to know that I'll do everything I can to make you comfortable. There's no rush for anything. We can take whatever time you need." His kindness made everything worse. Willa had expected someone rough, perhaps even crude, someone she could keep at arm's length without guilt. Instead, Zachary Nash stood before her with gentle eyes and a patient manner that made her want to confess everything and beg his forgiveness. But confession meant exposure, and exposure meant Robert finding her. She had seen the rage in his eyes when she rejected him, had heard the promises he made about what would happen if she ever tried to embarrass him publicly. A man like that wouldn't simply let her go. "You're very kind," Willa managed, though the words tasted bitter. "I appreciate your understanding. My wagon's just over here." Zachary gestured to where a sturdy farm wagon waited, hitched to 2 patient horses. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from town. It's not fancy, but it's comfortable enough. I've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who comes in 3 times a week. She's prepared the spare room for you. Like I said, No pressure for anything to change until you're ready. As Zachary helped her into the wagon, his hand gentle but firm on her elbow, Willa felt the enormity of her situation settle over her like a suffocating blanket. She had escaped one trap only to walk willingly into another, dragging an innocent man into her mess through her own lies. The right thing would be to tell him the truth now, to give him the choice to send her back before things went any further. But the thought of returning to Boston, of facing Robert's fury and her parents' disappointment, of becoming the property of a man who saw violence as his right, kept her silent as the wagon rolled out of town and into the vast Colorado landscape. The ranch appeared gradually as they crested a hill, a modest house nestled in a valley with outbuildings scattered around it and cattle grazing in the distance. It was simple but well-maintained, with a vegetable garden beside the house and curtains visible in the windows. Smoke rose from the chimney, promising warmth and civilization in this wild place. "It's not much," Zachary said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "But the land is good, and I've been building the herd steadily. In another few years, I'm hoping to expand, maybe build a bigger house if things go well." "It's lovely," Willa said, and was surprised to find she meant it. There was something appealing about the self-contained nature of the place, the sense of a man building something with his own hands. "Very peaceful. That it is, sometimes too peaceful when you're living alone." Zachary pulled the wagon to a stop near the house. "Mrs. Chen should have supper ready. She was excited to hear you were coming. We don't get many new people settling in these parts and even fewer women." Mrs. Chen turned out to be a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile, who greeted Willa in accented but clear English and immediately began fussing over her like a mother hen. "Too thin," she declared, looking Willa up and down. "Trained food no good. I make you eat properly." Despite everything, Willa found herself smiling. "That's very kind of you. You rest, wash up. Supper in 1 hour." Mrs. Chen shooed them both toward the stairs. "I show you room." The spare room was small but clean, with a window overlooking the mountains and a bed covered in a colorful quilt. Someone had placed fresh wildflowers in a jar on the dresser, and Willa felt her throat tighten at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "I'll let you get settled," Zachary said from the doorway, keeping a respectful distance. "Washroom is just down the hall. Take your time. I'll be downstairs when you're ready." Alone in the room, Willa sank onto the bed and let herself shake. She had made it this far, but every kindness from Zachary, every thoughtful gesture, made her deception feel more monstrous. She was not a widow. She had no experience running a household. Everything she had written in her letters had been carefully crafted lies designed to make her seem like a safe, respectable choice for a mail-order bride. But she couldn't go back. That path led only to Robert and a life of fear and pain. So she would have to move forward, would have to find a way to become the person she had pretended to be, and pray that her past stayed buried in Boston where it belonged. Supper was a quiet affair with Mrs. Chen serving a hearty stew and fresh bread, while keeping up a steady stream of conversation that required little response. Zachary ate steadily, occasionally glancing at Willa with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was interest there, certainly, but also a wariness that suggested he had his own reservations about this arrangement. "How long have you been ranching here?" Willa asked, forcing herself to make conversation. 5 years, like I mentioned. I came west after the war, looking for a fresh start like a lot of men." Zachary broke off a piece of bread, his movements deliberate. "Worked for other ranchers first, learned the trade, saved my money, bought this land 3 years ago and have been building it up since." "You fought in the war." The question slipped out before Willa could stop it, too personal for a first evening. "I did." Something flickered across Zachary's face, a shadow of old pain. "Don't much like to talk about it if you don't mind. Those days are behind me, of course. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have pried." "You've got a right to know who you're considering marrying." Zachary set down his bread and looked at her directly. "I'm not a complicated man, Miss Ashford. I work hard, I treat people fairly, and I keep my word. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. What you see is what you get." The irony of his words was like a knife to Willa's conscience. "That's admirable. Your letters mentioned you were widowed young. That must have been hard." There was genuine sympathy in Zachary's voice. Willa's appetite vanished. She had crafted an entire fictional husband during her letters, given him a name and profession, even invented the illness that supposedly took him. The lies flowed so easily on paper, but speaking them aloud to this honest man felt impossible. "It was difficult," she said carefully, keeping her eyes on her plate. "I prefer not to dwell on it if that's all right. Of course, I understand." Zachary's voice was kind. "We've both got pasts we're moving on from, that's fair enough." The evening ended early, with Willa claiming exhaustion from travel and retreating to her room. She lay awake for hours, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the cattle lowing in the distance, the wind against the house, the creak of Zachary moving around in his own room down the hall. She had thought running away would bring relief, but instead, she had simply traded one form of anxiety for another. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended state. Zachary left early each morning to work the ranch, returning for meals and treating Willa with unfailing courtesy and respect. He showed her around the property, introduced her to the ranch hands who came by periodically, and made clear in every action that he meant what he said about giving her time to adjust. Mrs. Cheng clucked over her cooking and tried to teach her basic household skills, gently correcting her many mistakes with patience that Willa didn't feel she deserved. On the 4th morning, Willa woke to the sound of horses and shouting. She rushed to the window and saw Zachary in the yard with 2 men she didn't recognize, all of them armed and speaking urgently. Her heart seized with irrational fear that somehow Robert had found her, that these men had come to drag her back. She dressed quickly and hurried downstairs, meeting Zachary as he came through the door. His face was grim. "What's wrong?" Willa asked. "Cattle rustlers hit the Jenkins place last night, took about 20 head and shot Jenkins when he tried to stop them." Zachary was checking his rifle with practiced efficiency. "The sheriff's putting together a group to track them. I need to go." "Is Mr. Jenkins all right? He'll live, but he's not in good shape. His wife and kids are scared half to death." Zachary paused, looking at Willa with concern. "I hate to leave you alone so soon after you arrived, but this is important. Rustlers can't be allowed to think they can operate freely in this area, or none of us will have any security." "I understand. You should go." Willa was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I'll be fine here. Mrs. Chen will be here in a couple hours. The hands know to check on the house regularly. There's a rifle in the cabinet in my office and ammunition in the drawer. Do you know how to shoot?" Willa shook her head. "No." Zachary frowned, clearly torn between duty and concern. "Lock the doors after I leave. Don't open them for anyone you don't recognize. I'll be back as soon as I can." He left within minutes, riding off with the other men in a cloud of dust. Willa watched from the window until they disappeared, then went through the house checking locks and windows with her heart pounding. The ranch, which had seemed peaceful before, now felt isolated and vulnerable. Every sound made her jump. Mrs. Chen arrived as promised, utterly unfazed by the situation. "Men always chasing something," she said matter-of-factly, starting preparations for the day's bread. "We do our work, they do theirs." Willa tried to help, but her hands shook too much to be useful. The morning dragged on endlessly, each hour feeling like 3. She found herself watching the road constantly, though whether she was hoping for Zachary's return or dreading the arrival of some threat, she couldn't say. It was early afternoon when she saw the rider approaching. A single man, dressed in clothes too fine for ranch work, riding a horse that looked expensive and fresh. Willa's blood turned to ice as recognition hit her like a physical blow. Robert Cavendish had found her. She ran to the cabinet in Zachary's office, pulling out the rifle with shaking hands. She had no idea how to use it, but maybe the sight of it would be enough to make him leave. Her mind raced through impossible options. She could refuse to open the door, but he would simply wait or break in. She could try to run, but she had nowhere to go and he had a horse. She could scream, but who would hear her? The knock on the door was firm and confident, the knock of a man who expected obedience. "Willa, I know you're in there." Robert's voice carried clearly through the door. "Your parents are worried sick. I've come to bring you home where you belong." Willa pressed herself against the wall beside the door, the rifle clutched awkwardly in her hands. "Go away, Robert. I'm not going anywhere with you. Don't be childish. You've had your little adventure, but it's time to face your responsibilities. We have a wedding to plan." "There is no wedding. I told you I wouldn't marry you." "You don't get to make that choice." Robert's voice hardened. "Your father accepted my suit. You gave your word. Now open this door before I lose my patience." "I never gave my word. My father gave it for me without asking what I wanted." Willa's voice was shaking, but she forced herself to continue. "And after you put your hands on me, after you hurt me, you lost any right to claim my promise. I disciplined you for your disrespect, as is my right as your intended husband." Robert sounded irritated rather than apologetic. "You needed to learn your place. Now stop this nonsense and open the door. I'm not going to ask again." The door handle rattled as he tried it, then there was a heavy thud as he threw his weight against the wood. Willa jumped back, bringing the rifle up even though she had no idea how to fire it. The door shuddered under another impact. "Mrs. Chen, get to the kitchen and stay there," Willa called out, hoping the older woman would have the sense to hide. Another crash, and the door frame began to splinter. Robert was strong and determined, and the door wouldn't hold much longer. Willa's mind went blank with panic. She couldn't let him take her. She would rather die in this Colorado ranch house than go back to being his victim. The sound of galloping hoofbeats barely registered before the crashing against the door stopped abruptly. Robert's voice came again, but this time it was muffled, speaking to someone outside. Then a different voice, deep and cold with fury. "You need to step away from that door right now, Zachary." Willa ran to the window and saw him sitting on his horse, his rifle trained on Robert with a steadiness that spoke of absolute certainty. The other men who had ridden out with him were fanned out behind him, all armed, all watching Robert with the hard eyes of men who had seen violence and weren't afraid of it. "This is a private matter," Robert said, trying to regain his imperious tone. "That woman is my fiancée, and I'm taking her home. That woman is a guest in my home, and she told you to leave." Zachary's voice was flat and dangerous. "You're trespassing on my property and trying to break into my house. Out here, that's enough reason to shoot you. You wouldn't dare. Do you know who I am? My father is one of the most powerful men in Boston. You're just some dirt farmer playing cowboy. If you interfere, I'll destroy you. I don't care if your father is the president himself." Zachary shifted in his saddle, the rifle never wavering. "Out here, your family's money doesn't mean anything. What matters is that you're threatening a woman under my protection, and that ends now." Willa threw open the door, unable to stay hidden any longer. "He's the one I was running from," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. I lied to you, Mr. Nash. I'm not a widow. I was engaged to him, and when I wouldn't go through with the marriage, when I tried to tell people what he really was, no one would listen. So I ran." Zachary's eyes flicked to her briefly, his expression unreadable, before returning to Robert. "Seems like you had good reason to run." "She's a liar and a thief," Robert spat. "She stole from her own family. She deceived you with her letters. You really want to protect someone like that?" "I want to protect someone who's scared enough to run halfway across the country to get away from you." Zachary's voice was steady. "Now you've got two choices. You can ride back to town, get on the next train east, and forget you ever knew where she went, or we can settle this another way. Your choice." Robert's hand moved toward the pistol at his hip. He was fast. Willa would give him that. But he wasn't fast enough. Before his gun cleared the holster, 3 rifles were pointed at his chest, Zachary's and 2 of the men behind him, all of them with the kind of casual competence that said they knew how to use them. "Don't be stupid," Zachary said quietly. "You're a city man playing at being tough. These men have been in actual fights. You won't win." For a long moment, Robert stood frozen, his hand on his half-drawn pistol, his face red with rage and humiliation. Then, slowly, he let the gun drop back into the holster. "You'll regret this," he said, looking past Zachary to Willa. "Both of you, I'll make sure of it." "You need to leave now," Zachary said. "And if you're smart, you'll keep riding until you're out of Colorado. Because if I see you around here again, I won't bother with warnings." Robert mounted his horse, his movements stiff with barely controlled fury. He stared at Willa one last time, his eyes promising retribution, then turned and rode away at a gallop. They all watched until he disappeared over the hill. Zachary dismounted slowly, handing his rifle to one of the other men. "Tom, Jim, would you mind checking the perimeter? Make sure he actually leaves and doesn't circle back." "You got it, Zach." The men rode off, leaving Willa and Zachary alone in the yard. "I'm sorry," Willa said, the words barely audible. "I'm so sorry. You were right, I lied to you about everything. I understand if you want me to leave." Zachary walked toward her, his expression still unreadable. "Why don't you tell me the truth now, all of it?" So she did. Standing in the dusty yard with the mountains watching, Willa told him everything. About Robert's courtship, which had seemed charming at first but quickly turned possessive and controlling. About the first time he had grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises, and how he had apologized with flowers and promises to do better. About how the violence escalated, how her attempts to break the engagement were met with rage from Robert and pressure from her parents, who couldn't see past his wealth and status. About the night he had hit her hard enough to blacken her eye, and how her mother had helped her cover it with powder and told her that marriage required compromise. "I stole $50 from my mother's household money," Willa said, tears streaming down her face. "I know that makes me a thief. And I lied in my letters because I knew no one would accept a runaway with no references and a scandal following her. I know I deceived you. I know I deserve whatever you decide to do with me, but I couldn't go back. I couldn't spend my life with someone who thought he had the right to hurt me whenever I displeased him." Zachary listened to all of it without interrupting, his face grave. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You should have told me the truth from the start," he said finally. "I know, I'm sorry. But I understand why you didn't." Zachary sighed, rubbing his hand over his face. "And for what it's worth, I don't think you're a thief. You took money to save your own life. That's survival, not theft." Willa looked up at him through her tears. "So you don't want me to leave?" "Leave?" Zachary's eyes widened slightly. "Miss Ashford, that man just tried to break into my house to kidnap you by force. He threatened you and tried to draw on me. If you think I'm going to send you away now, you're crazy. But I lied to you." "You did. And we'll need to talk about that. about starting fresh with honesty between us. But lying in letters to escape an abusive situation is a whole different thing from being a dishonest person. Zachary stepped closer, his voice gentle. The woman I've gotten to know these past few days has been kind to Mrs. Chen, interested in learning about the ranch, and brave enough to face down an armed man with a rifle she doesn't even know how to use. That's who you are. The rest is just circumstances. How can you be so understanding? Willa wiped at her tears. Most men would be furious about the deception. Most men haven't seen what I've seen. Zachary's expression darkened briefly. I told you I fought in the war. I saw what happened when powerful men decided they owned other people, decided they had the right to control every aspect of someone else's life. I didn't fight for 4 years just to come home and become that kind of man myself. What do we do now? Willa asked. Robert meant what he said. He'll try to cause trouble for you. Let him try. His father's influence doesn't reach to Colorado, and by the time any complaints make their way through official channels, it will be clear what really happened. An Eastern gentleman tried to abduct a woman from a private home, and the landowner defended her. No sheriff in the territory will have a problem with that. Zachary smiled slightly. Besides, I've got a feeling Mr. Cavendish isn't going to want too many questions asked about why his son was out here trying to force a woman to marry him. Men like that depend on keeping their ugly business private. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway, surveying the scene with sharp eyes. Everyone okay? I hear shouting. Everyone's fine, Mrs. Chen, Zachary assured her. Crisis is over. Good. Then come eat lunch, food getting cold. She disappeared back into the house with the air of someone who had seen everything and was unimpressed by drama. Despite everything, Willa found herself laughing, a slightly hysterical sound that came from pure relief. Zachary grinned at her. She's got her priorities straight, he said. Come on, let's eat and then we can talk about what happens next. Over lunch, they talked more honestly than they had since Willa arrived. She told him about her real life in Boston, her love of reading and her dreams of seeing the West, her difficult relationship with parents who valued appearances over their daughter's well-being. Zachary talked about his own past, about growing up on a farm in Kansas, losing his parents to illness, fighting in a war he didn't fully understand, and coming west to build something that was entirely his own. I never lied about wanting a partner, Zachary said. Running this place alone is hard and lonely. I want someone to share it with, to build a future with. The letters were a way to find that, since eligible women are scarce out here. But I want it to be real, not just a business arrangement. I want affection and respect between us. I want that too, Willa said softly. I've never had much of either. Then how about we start over? No more lies between us, just honesty about who we are and what we want. We take our time, get to know each other properly, and see if this could work. Willa felt a weight lift from her chest. I'd like that very much. The days that followed were different from those first tense days after her arrival. With the truth laid bare between them, Willa felt free to be herself rather than the person she had pretended to be. She admitted she was a terrible cook and had never run a household, and Mrs. Chen took great joy in teaching her properly. She spent hours with Zachary as he worked around the ranch, learning about the cattle and horses, about the rhythms of this life she had stumbled into. And slowly, carefully, they began to fall in love. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was in the way Zachary patiently taught her to ride, his hands gentle as he showed her how to hold the reins. It was in the way Willa laughed at his stories about ranch mishaps, her genuine amusement bringing a light to her face that had been missing before. It was in the quiet evenings sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains, comfortable in silence or easy conversation. 3 weeks after Robert's departure, a letter arrived from Boston. Willa opened it with shaking hands, fearing some new threat, but instead found a brief note from her mother. Robert had called off the engagement, her mother wrote, claiming that Willa had proven herself of poor character and unsuitable for the position of his wife. Her parents were humiliated by the scandal and preferred she stay away for the foreseeable future. The coldness of the letter stung, but beneath the pain was relief. She was free. "Are you all right?" Zachary asked, watching her face as she read. "I think so." Willa folded the letter carefully. "It hurts that they care more about their reputation than about me, but I suppose I already knew that. And it means Robert has given up, at least publicly. He's too proud to keep pursuing me after telling everyone I'm not worthy of him." "His loss is my gain," Zachary said simply. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony in Gold Hill's small church with Mrs. Chen and the ranch hands as witnesses. Willa wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Chen had helped her make, and Zachary wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and utterly sincere as he said his vows. "I promise to protect you, to listen to you, to treat you as an equal partner in all things," he said, holding her hands and looking into her eyes. "I promise to never raise my hand to you in anger, to never make you fear me. I promise to be worthy of the trust you're placing in me." Willa's vows were just as heartfelt. "I promise to be honest with you, to trust you with my true self, to work beside you in building our life together. I promise to be brave when things are hard, to believe in us even when it's difficult. I promise to love you as you deserve to be loved." Their wedding night was gentle and sweet, with Zachary taking his time to make sure Willa felt safe and cherished. He had known without being told that her experience with Robert would have left scars beyond the physical, and he was patient as she learned to trust him with this new intimacy. "We have all the time in the world," he whispered as he held her afterward, her head resting on his chest. "There's no rush for anything. We just take it day by day, building our life together." The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were times when money was tight and the future uncertain. Willa struggled to adapt to the physical demands of ranch life, her hands blistering from work she had never done before. But through it all, they supported each other, their bond growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame together. Zachary proved to be everything he had promised. He never raised his voice in anger, never made her feel small or stupid when she made mistakes, never treated her as anything less than his full partner. He asked her opinion on decisions about the ranch and listened seriously to her suggestions. He surprised her with small gestures of affection, wildflowers left on her pillow or her favorite meal prepared on difficult days. And Willa bloomed under his care like a plant, finally given proper water and sunlight. The frightened, diminished woman who had arrived at the train station transformed into someone confident and capable. She learned to ride well enough to help drive cattle, mastered Mrs. Chen's recipes, and proved to have a good head for the ranch's finances. More than that, she laughed freely and spoke her mind without fear, secure in the knowledge that Zachary valued her thoughts and feelings. On their first anniversary, they lay together in bed as the sun rose over the mountains, Willa tracing patterns on Zachary's chest while he played with her hair. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Taking a chance on a runaway bride who lied to you?" "Never." Zachary's answer was immediate and certain. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me. This whole place, everything I've built, it didn't mean much until I had you to share it with." "I love you," Willa said, the words coming easily now though they had been so hard to say at first. "I didn't know what love was supposed to feel like until I found it with you. I thought it was supposed to hurt, supposed to make you smaller. You showed me it's the opposite. I love you too." Zachary kissed her forehead. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt that." 2 months later, Willa realized she was pregnant. The news brought a mix of joy and anxiety. Childbirth was dangerous, especially this far from sophisticated medical care, and she couldn't help but worry. But Zachary was thrilled and attentive, insisting she rest more and working even harder to ensure everything was ready for their growing family. Mrs. Chen appointed herself Willa's guardian, watching over her like a hawk and making sure she ate properly and didn't overwork herself. "First baby very important," she said firmly. "You take care, everything be fine." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the hot summer months. As Willa's belly grew, so did her confidence about the future. She and Zachary spent long evenings planning, talking about how to expand the house and what kind of parents they wanted to be. They agreed that any children they had would be raised with love and respect, never with the coldness Willa had known or the violence Robert had shown. In late February of 1884, as snow fell softly outside and the fire crackled in the hearth, Willa went into labor. Mrs. Chen had moved into the house a week earlier in preparation, and she took charge immediately, sending Zachary to fetch the doctor from town while she prepared everything needed. The labor was long and difficult. Willa had never known such pain, and there were moments when she was sure she wouldn't survive it. But Mrs. Chen's calm presence and steady encouragement kept her focused, and when Zachary returned with the doctor, his presence gave her new strength. He held her hand through it all, murmuring words of love and support, his face pale but his grip steady. Just after dawn, as the sun was rising over the snow-covered mountains, their son was born. He came into the world squalling, healthy and strong, and when the doctor placed him in Willa's arms, she felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "He's perfect," Zachary said, his voice thick with emotion as he looked at his son. "You did so well. I'm so proud of you." They named him James after Zachary's father and watched in wonder as he opened his eyes and looked at them. Willa felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy this time, not fear or pain. "I can't believe he's really ours," she whispered. "Ours to love and protect," Zachary agreed. "He's going to grow up knowing he's wanted and cherished. He'll never doubt that he matters." The months that followed were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a demanding baby, keeping them up at all hours, but neither of them minded. Zachary proved to be a devoted father, taking his turn walking the floor with their son in the middle of the night, changing diapers without complaint, and looking at James with such obvious adoration that it made Willa's heart swell. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. The cattle herd increased, and Zachary was able to hire more help, easing the burden of work. They expanded the house, adding more rooms for their growing family and making improvements that transformed the simple ranch house into a real home. On a warm evening in the spring of 1886, with 2-year-old James playing at their feet and Willa's hand resting on her pregnant belly, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Did you ever imagine your life would turn out like this?" Zachary asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Not even in my wildest dreams," Willa admitted. "When I got on that train in Boston, I was just running. I didn't dare hope I'd find something this good. A home, a real marriage, children who will grow up surrounded by love." "You ran to me," Zachary said softly. "Even if you didn't know it at the time. You ran to me, not from me, and I will never, ever make you regret that." Their second child, a daughter they named Sarah, was born that summer. She had Willa's dark hair and Zachary's green eyes, and she completed their family in a way they hadn't known they needed. James took to his role as big brother with enthusiasm, wanting to help with everything and showing his baby sister off to anyone who would look. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. The ranch became one of the most successful in the area, a testament to Zachary's skill and Willa's head for business. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, cattle prices that fluctuated wildly, and the occasional conflict with neighboring ranchers. But through it all, they faced challenges together, their partnership growing stronger with each year. James grew into a thoughtful, kind boy who loved the ranch and followed his father everywhere. Sarah was more adventurous, always getting into mischief and keeping her parents on their toes. When their third child, another son they named Thomas, was born in 1890, the older children doted on him like he was their own personal toy. Mrs. Chen remained a fixture in their lives, aging gracefully and treating the children like her own grandchildren since she had none of her own. She taught them to speak basic Chinese, filled them with traditional foods, and told them stories about her own homeland that she had left behind decades ago to come west. On a crisp autumn day in 1895, 11 years after their wedding, Willa and Zachary stood in the cemetery in Gold Hill, paying their respects at Mrs. Chen's grave. She had passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72, and her loss had hit them all hard. She was family, Willa said, tears streaming down her face as she placed flowers on the grave. I don't know what I would have done without her, especially in those early days. She loved you like a daughter, Zachary said, his own eyes damp, and she loved the children so much. They're going to miss her terribly. They walked back to where their children waited by the wagon. James was 14 now, tall and strong, already able to do a man's work around the ranch. Sarah was 9, spirited and bright, always asking questions about everything. Thomas was 5, still young enough to not fully understand why Mrs. Chen wouldn't be coming around anymore. As they rode home, Willa leaned against Zachary's shoulder, drawing comfort from his steady presence. So much had changed since that day she had arrived at the train station, terrified and running from a nightmare. She had built a life beyond anything she could have imagined, filled with love and purpose and family. "You ever think about Boston?" Zachary asked quietly. "Sometimes. I wonder if my parents are still alive, what they might think if they could see me now. But I don't regret leaving. I only regret that it took me so long to find the courage to run." Willa looked up at him. "You saved my life, you know. Not just by protecting me from Robert that day, but by showing me what love is supposed to be. You gave me a life worth living." "You saved mine too," Zachary said. "I was just going through the motions before you came, working and existing but not really living. You brought light into everything. You made this ranch a home, gave me a family, gave me purpose beyond just surviving." That evening, after the children were in bed, they sat together in the parlor they had added to the house 5 years earlier. The walls were lined with books now, Willa having indulged her love of reading by building an impressive library. Photographs of the family sat on every surface, chronicling their life together. "I want you to know something," Zachary said, taking her hand. "If I could go back to that day at the train station, knowing everything that happened, all the challenges and hard times, I'd still choose you every single time. You're my partner, my love, my best friend. You're everything to me." Willa felt fresh tears prick her eyes. "You're everything to me too. You took a scared runaway bride and showed her how to be brave. You taught me that I could trust again, that I was worth loving. Every good thing in my life comes from the day I took a chance on a mail-order marriage to a cowboy I'd never met." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, listening to the familiar sounds of their home settling around them. Through the window, The mountains were silhouetted against the starry sky, eternal and unchanging, watching over the valley where they had built their life. The years continued to pass, bringing new joys and challenges. James fell in love with a teacher who came to Gold Hill, a kind young woman named Rachel who fit into their family as if she had always been there. Willa and Zachary danced at their wedding and welcomed their first grandchild, a beautiful baby girl, with the kind of joy that comes from seeing your children happy. Sarah proved to have her mother's head for numbers and her father's work ethic. She shocked the community by announcing she wanted to go to college to study business, but Zachary and Willa supported her dreams. They sent her to Denver with their blessing and enough money for tuition, proud of the confident young woman she had become. Thomas grew up to be the dreamer of the family, with a talent for art that seemed to come from nowhere. He spent hours sketching the mountains and cattle, the horses and wildlife, capturing the beauty of their Colorado home in pencil and charcoal. Zachary had prints made of his son's best work and hung them proudly in the house. In the spring of 1903, Willa and Zachary celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party, inviting half the county, and the house was filled with laughter and music. As Willa danced with her husband, she marveled at how quickly the time had passed. 20 years, she said. It feels like yesterday and a lifetime ago at the same time. 20 years of waking up beside you, Zachary said. 20 years of building this life together. And I hope we have at least 20 more. They did have more years together, blessed with good health and continuing prosperity. They watched James and Rachel have 3 more children, watched Sarah return from college, and start a successful business managing accounts for ranchers throughout the region, watched Thomas leave for New York to pursue his art before eventually returning home, unable to stay away from the mountains he loved. In 1912, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset on a warm summer evening, Zachary turned to Willa with a thoughtful expression. "Do you remember what I said to you that day Robert came, when you told me you had lied?" "You said we'd start over with honesty," Willa replied. "I also said you ran to me, not from me. I've been thinking about that lately. You were so scared that day you arrived, so sure you had made a terrible mistake. But you were braver than you knew. You ran toward a better life, even though you had no guarantee what you'd find. That takes courage." "I ran to you," Willa agreed softly. "Even though I didn't realize it at the time. I answered your advertisement because something in your letters made me feel safe, made me think maybe there was a different kind of man out there than what I'd known. I was right." Zachary pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. The ranch spread out before them, transformed by 30 years of hard work and love into something substantial and lasting. Their children's laughter drifted from inside the house where they had gathered for Sunday supper, and the sound of their grandchildren playing echoed from the yard. "I've had a good life," Zachary said eventually. "A better life than I ever expected. And all of it is because a scared young woman got off a train in Gold Hill and decided to trust me with her truth. And a cowboy decided to give that scared young woman a chance instead of sending her away," Willa added. "You could have been angry about the lies. You could have put me back on that train. Instead, you protected me and gave me time to find my courage. That's who you are, Zachary Nash, the best man I've ever known." They celebrated their 30th anniversary in 1914, surrounded by family and friends. James had taken over most of the day-to-day running of the ranch, allowing Zachary to slow down a bit, though he still rode out every day to check on things. Sarah's business had expanded to include consulting for businesses beyond just ranchers, and she had become something of a local celebrity as one of the few successful female business owners in Colorado. Thomas had gained recognition for his artwork, with pieces hanging in galleries in Denver and beyond, though he maintained that his best work was still the Colorado landscapes he created at home. As Willa looked around at the gathering, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had 6 grandchildren now, with another on the way, and the love in the room was palpable. This family, this life, had grown from the seeds planted that day she stepped off the train, terrified and alone. "Grandmother, tell us the story again," one of the grandchildren begged after supper. "About how you met grandfather." Willa glanced at Zachary, who smiled and nodded. She had told this story many times over the years, always emphasizing the lessons within it. "I was running away from a bad situation," she began, gathering the children around her. "I was scared and didn't know where I was going or what would happen to me. But sometimes running away is the bravest thing you can do, especially when you're running towards something better, even if you don't know what that something is yet. And then grandfather saved you from the bad man." One of the younger grandchildren piped up. "He did," Willa agreed. "But more importantly, he gave me a chance to save myself. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He taught me that love isn't about control or fear. It's about respect and partnership and choosing each other every single day. That's the most important thing to remember," Zachary added, pulling Willa close. "Real love makes you stronger, not weaker. It lifts you up instead of tearing you down. Your grandmother taught me that just as much as I taught her." The children listened raptly, asking questions and making comments, and Willa felt a deep satisfaction knowing that these grandchildren would grow up understanding what healthy love looked like. They would never accept less than they deserved, because they had seen what a real marriage could be. As the evening wound down and family members began to depart for their own homes, Willa and Zachary stood on the porch, waving goodbye. The mountains were silhouetted against the darkening sky, their eternal presence a comfort and a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of things, and yet how significant their choices had been. "Tired?" Zachary asked, noting the way Willa leaned against the porch railing. "A little. But it's a good tired, the kind that comes from a day well spent with people you love." They went inside together, banking the fire and checking that everything was secure, moving through the routines of 30 years of marriage with the ease of long practice. As they prepared for bed, Willa caught sight of their reflection in the mirror. They were both older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but their eyes still held the same warmth they had developed in those early days of getting to know each other. "I'd do it all over again," she said suddenly. "Every hard part, every challenge, every moment of fear and uncertainty, I'd do it all again to end up right here with you." Zachary came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her eyes in the mirror. "So would I." Without hesitation, "You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Willa Nash." They climbed into bed, and Willa settled into her familiar position with her head on Zachary's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called to its pack. The ranch was quiet and peaceful, secure in the darkness. "You think they understand?" Willa asked sleepily. "The children and grandchildren. Do you think they really understand how lucky we are?" "I think they understand love," Zachary replied, his fingers gently combing through her hair. "That's the important part. They've grown up seeing what we have, and they'll look for the same thing in their own lives. That's the best legacy we could leave them." Willa drifted off to sleep feeling content and blessed, secure in the arms of the man who had shown her what love was supposed to be. She had run halfway across the country to escape a nightmare, and instead had found a dream she hadn't known to hope for. The following years brought the inevitable changes that time always brings. They slowed down more, spending longer hours on the porch and fewer in the saddle. Their children took on more responsibility, running the ranch and their own lives with the competence that came from being raised by parents who had taught them well. The grandchildren grew, some staying near home and others venturing out into the wider world, but all of them coming back regularly because family mattered. In the winter of 1921, Zachary fell ill. It started as a cough that wouldn't go away, then developed into something more serious. The doctor came out from town regularly, doing what he could, but they all knew the truth. Zachary was 72 years old and had lived a hard life in a harsh climate. His body was simply wearing out. Willa barely left his side during those final weeks. Their children and grandchildren visited constantly, and Zachary held court from his bed, sharing stories and advice, making sure everyone knew how much he loved them. But his private moments were reserved for Willa. "I'm not afraid," he told her one evening as the sun set outside the window. "I've had a good life, a full life. I got to spend almost 40 years with the woman I love. That's more than most men can say." "Don't talk like that," Willa said, though tears streamed down her face. "You're going to get better. We both know I'm not." Zachary took her hand, his grip weaker than it used to be but still warm. "And that's all right. I'm at peace with it, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't stop living when I'm gone. You've got years left in you, and I want you to fill them with joy. Spend time with the grandchildren, tend your garden, read all those books you've been saving. Remember me, but don't let grief consume you. Promise me." "I promise," Willa whispered, though she couldn't imagine how she would keep that promise. Zachary had been her anchor, her partner, her love for almost 40 years. How was she supposed to continue without him? But she did promise, and she meant it. Because that was what love was, giving someone what they needed even when it hurt you to do it. Zachary passed peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, with Willa holding his hand and their children gathered around. His last words had been, "I love you," spoken to Willa with his final conscious breath, and she would treasure them for the rest of her life. The grief was overwhelming at first. Willa went through the motions of the funeral, accepted condolences from half the county, watched as they laid Zachary to rest in the Gold Hill Cemetery next to Mrs. Chen and other old friends. But inside she felt hollow, as if part of her had been buried with him. Her children rallied around her, taking turns staying at the ranch house so she wouldn't be alone, making sure she ate and slept and didn't disappear too far into her grief. And slowly, painfully, Willa found her way back to living. She kept her promise to Zachary. She spent time with her grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather and making sure they knew what an exceptional man he had been. She tended her garden, finding peace in the simple act of nurturing growing things. She read voraciously, losing herself in other worlds while honoring this one. And she made sure the ranch continued to prosper, because it had been their dream together and she wouldn't let it fail. On what would have been their 40th anniversary, Willa rode out to a spot on the ranch that had been special to them, a rise that overlooked the valley with the mountains as a backdrop. She had been avoiding this place because the memories were too painful, but today she forced herself to go. She stood looking out at the view, remembering all the times they had come here together. This was where Zachary had first told her he loved her. This was where they had brought the children for picnics. This was where they had come on their 25th anniversary and renewed their vows to each other with just the mountains as witnesses. "I miss you," Willa said aloud to the wind. "Every day I miss you. But I'm still here, still living, still finding joy where I can. I hope that makes you proud. I hope you know that everything we built together continues. The ranch is thriving, The children are happy, and the grandchildren are growing up surrounded by love, just like we wanted. She imagined she could feel Zachary's presence, warm and reassuring, telling her she was doing well. The fancy of it made her smile through her tears. "You told me once that I ran to you, not from me. You were right. I ran toward love even when I didn't know that was what I was looking for, and you gave me the most beautiful life. Thank you for that. Thank you for everything." Willa stayed until the sun began to set, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple, then rode slowly back to the ranch house. She would never stop missing Zachary, but she had learned that grief and joy could coexist, that you could honor the past while still embracing the present. She lived another 12 years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born and to celebrate her 80th birthday surrounded by a family that had grown large and loving. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, still managing the ranch's finances and offering advice to anyone who asked for it. On a warm spring morning in 1933, Willa passed away peacefully in her sleep, 50 years after she had first arrived at the Gold Hill train station. Her children laid her to rest beside Zachary, reuniting them at last. The minister who presided over the funeral spoke of a life well lived, of a woman who had shown courage and strength, who had built a family and a legacy that would continue for generations. But it was James, her eldest son, who spoke the words that truly captured his mother's story. "She came here alone and afraid, running from something terrible toward something unknown," he said, his voice carrying clearly to the large crowd gathered to pay their respects. "She found my father, and together they built something beautiful. They taught all of us what love looks like, what partnership means, what it is to face life's challenges together. My mother used to say that she ran to my father, not from him, and in doing so found her home. They gave each other their best years, and they gave all of us the gift of their example. That's a legacy worth celebrating." The ranch continued under the care of their children and grandchildren, generation after generation working the land that Willa and Zachary had claimed as their own. The house was expanded and modernized over the years, but certain things never changed. The photographs remained on the walls, chronicling the family's history. The view of the mountains from the porch was still spectacular. And every generation was told the story of the mail-order bride who had been running away, and the cowboy who had told her to run to him instead. It became a family legend, the kind of love story that got better with each telling. How Willa had arrived with nothing but lies and fear. How Zachary had protected her and given her a chance. How they had built a life together based on honesty, respect, and devotion. How they had faced every challenge as partners, never letting anything come between them. The great-grandchildren who had never met them knew their story. The great-great-grandchildren who came after learned it too. And in learning it, they learned what love was supposed to be. Not control or possession, not violence or fear, but partnership and respect, support and devotion, choosing each other every day no matter what challenges arose. The ranch in Gold Hill, Colorado remained in the family well into the next century, a testament to what two people had built together when one had run toward love instead of from it, and the other had given her a safe place to land. The mountains watched over it all, eternal and unchanging, witnesses to a love story that had transformed two lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. And if sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set over the peaks and painted the sky in shades of gold, visitors to the ranch claimed they could sense something special in the air, a feeling of warmth and love that seemed to emanate from the land itself. Well, those who knew the story understood. Willa and Zachary's love had soaked into the very soil of this place, becoming as much a part of it as the mountains and sky. Their story was one of courage and second chances, of running toward hope instead of from fear, of building something beautiful from broken pieces. It was a story about a mail-order bride who was a runaway, and a cowboy who said, "Run to me, not from me." And it was a story that would never be forgotten, living on in the hearts and lives of everyone who came after them. A reminder that love, real love, could heal any wound and overcome any obstacle, as long as two people were willing to face it together.